I'm having
Hello.
trouble editing, so this may be a bit clunky. This is my first attempt at making a Halo Fallout Apocalypse survival guide.
TikTok, so that way I can just go back and edit it and make it a real video. Alright, so I originally planned on making a YouTube channel, kind of like Installation 00 for Halo stuff, but I wanted my avatar to be BB, the black box from one of the Halo books. So that's what I wanted to do and have total anonymity that way, but I've kind of found that it's really, really difficult to be anonymous overall. So I originally had planned to do a glassing speech on like how to survive a Covenant attack for Halo, like a glassing attack where they're melting the whole planet using plasma. So I was planning on doing that, but it kind of takes a little more preparation than I've actually done, and I wanted to do that under the, the anonymity of my Halo avatar that I wanted to create. But, so I'm going to do this one. It's just going to be more of like how to survive nuclear war, nuclear fallout, because I've done a lot of research in that in college, and it's actually easier to survive than you would think. So I thought that that would be a fun thing to talk about. In college, and it's actually easier to survive than you would think. So I thought that that would be a fun thing to talk about. So I'm just going to talk about it in general before I get into the actual speech that I have, because I have notes, so I can remember how to do everything. But essentially, nuclear war is either really easy to survive or really difficult to survive, because it depends on where you live. If you're in a target zone where a nuke is going to come down, well, then you don't have to worry about anything because you'll be vaporized, and you don't have to worry about surviving because you're already dead. And that's like military bases, places where there's nuclear silos, like some places in Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, like the vast empty Midwest, or middle of the Americas, Kansas. It's like they got lots of nuclear silos there, and that's why our nuke's going to land, is to try and blow up those silos. But you don't have to worry about living there because nobody lives there, or hardly anybody does. So anyway, yeah, if you're going to get blasted by a nuke, well, you don't really have to worry about surviving because you're dead. So what we really are going to talk about is fallout, because that's the thing that you have to worry about after the nukes come down. And whether you are in a blast zone or not, that's just kind of luck of the draw, or, where you decide to live. I used to live in Oregon in a spot where there was no target to be attacked, and the radiation typically blows eastwardly with the prevailing winds. So it was a target to be attacked, and the radiation typically blows eastwardly with the prevailing winds. So it was a spot that was actually really good to survive a nuclear war. Now I'm in North Carolina, so it's a really terrible spot. It's like one of on the East Coast with tons of population, tons of military targets. Like Virginia is just coated in military targets, so I'm sure it would get blasted in any war. So anyway, coated in military targets, so I'm sure it would get blasted in any war. So anyway, to start out with, when dealing with fallout, it's actually fairly easy to deal with since it decays. So anyway, to start out with, when dealing with fallout, it's actually fairly easy to deal with since it decays rather quickly. I can't remember the exact amounts of time, but like fallout goes from lethal levels to like non-lethal levels in about a week, if I remember right. If you're like in the crater, obviously the radioactive material is going to be a little bit more radioactive for longer, because then it's like heavy metals and other iron type material that is radiated, which lasts longer. But typically it's just like water molecules and dust molecules that are irradiated, and they don't have a long half-life, so they tend to become safe quickly. So if you can survive a week with sheltering in place, and before you go and like actual seek some realistic shelter, then that's the way you're gonna go. So the first thing that I think everybody should look up when they're trying to survive nuclear fallout or learn about how to survive it is to look up a nuke map, because they have a lot of old school projections during the Cold War about where you could, where the fallout's going to be, where the nukes are going to land, and they're pretty accurate because it's based off of our knowledge of where our best stuff is, and the Russians probably know where that stuff is, so they're going to be nuking that stuff. And like I was saying earlier, the place where I was at in Oregon was fairly safe because the only thing that was worth maybe nuking in my area was OSU. And why nuke a college? It's just like, maybe they would, but most likely no. You're not going to waste a nuke on a college. You're going to want to use it on a military base or like a major city or something. So anyway, the first thing you want to do is to look up the nuke map from the Cold War and see, like, okay, here's where the nukes are going to land. Am I in a danger zone or not? So that's just to get a good idea of like where the safe zones, quote unquote safe zones, are in the event of nuclear war. There is also a nuclear blast zone app which you can calculate. Like you pick the city, and then you can pick like the yield of the nuke. Like a lot of people who were doing the Fallout show, is it realistic or not, we're using that app to calculate that. And it's actually, I used that several years before to try and calculate whether Portland would be like relatively safe, which is odd because it depends on whether it's an airburst or a ground burst. Most nukes are airburst these days because that's does the most damage. It also has the least fallout with an airburst because it's throwing its energy into the ground, and it's not churning up tons of dirt. It's just basically trying to knock all the buildings flat or burn all the buildings. With a ground burst, when it hits the ground and blows up, it doesn't do as much damage because most of the energy is going into the dirt. But because all that energy is going into the dirt and rock, all that dirt and rock is getting shot up into the air in a big mushroom cloud, like even bigger than if you did an airburst. And all that stuff is irradiated. All that dirt and rock and who knows what, concrete, steel, everything is getting shot up into the atmosphere. It's all irradiated, so it spreads more irradiation around. But it doesn't do as much damage as an airburst on the surface. So it kind of depends on what your enemy is trying to accomplish, because if they're trying to irradiate the area forever, then they're going to do a ground burst. If they're just trying to do mass damage in in that instance, then they're going to do airburst. So there are also some illegal nukes that like a dirty bomb where you're blowing up nuclear material. If you like using a conventional explosive to send nuclear material in a wide area, then that area would be contaminated for thousands of years because the nuclear material is meant to have a long half-life. They also have like neutrino bombs and like certain, like I think it was cobalt bombs. There's certain bombs that are illegal worldwide that would contaminate an area for a long time. But the majority of the nukes that are on file are like a certain megatonnage, and they're all going to be used like airburst style if they had to be used at all. So you could pretty much count on the nuclear fallout map and that blast zone calculator to get a good idea of what would happen if there were nukes, like one nuke or 100 nukes or whatever. But with the blast zone map, one of the blast zone app, one of the things it doesn't calculate is deflection from mountains and buildings, because when a nuke goes off, some of the energy will be redirected or absorbed by surrounding mountains. And Portland is a perfect example. It's sitting on the side of a small mountain, not exactly a mountain, but a large hill. And then there's like the river down at the bottom, and then there's the Columbia that goes the other way. So if a nuke landed downtown Portland, Hillsboro might be fine because all the explosion would be blasted either upwards or to the east. So Hillsboro might be totally fine if Portland got blasted. So when you're calculating whether an area is safe or not, you have to put that into consideration. The surrounding mountains, the surrounding buildings. You have to take into consideration the geological features of the area that's getting blasted, even if it is an airburst, but especially if it's a ground burst. Okay, so using those techniques, you can kind of get a good idea of what it would look like if a nuke landed in your area. So that's like if you're a prepper, or you're worried about the future, or you're worried about, say, like North Korea nukes or something. You can look up, oh, this is the tonnage that they got, this is the blast that they're able to accomplish, and like knowledge is power, and knowing about these things can kind of put your mind at ease. I know it does for me, and that's why I do the research on it. And so basically, like I was saying earlier, if you're in a site that's being attacked, like blast zone, like there's a military base nearby, or a dense populated center like New York or like LA or whatever, you pretty much either you're going to be vaporized or you're going to be okay, and then you have to just worry about the fallout, because there's certain blast diameters where it's like everything in this area is just going to be vaporized, everything in this area is going to be flattened from the shockwave, and then an extended area you have to worry about flash burns and flying glass, because the overpressure wave won't be enough to kill you outright. So it's like, if you're in that zone where the bomb goes off, it's funny because they have these old videos, they're like duck and cover. You're like, oh, well, what is it gonna do to save you if you're ducking and covering from an explosion, a nuclear explosion? But it actually does, because if you're in that zone, the thing that's gonna kill you isn't the bomb, it's the flying glass from the bomb being flung outwards. So if you duck, then you have a lower chance of getting hit by flying glass. And cover, same thing. If you got some kind of cover, that'll help you a bit. And it's really funny because even in the duck and cover videos, they show a guy getting underneath a newspaper, like duck and covering using a newspaper, and it's like, it kind of makes you laugh, like, why, like, in the world does he think a newspaper is going to help? But it has been found that newspaper would help you from the flash burns, because when the bombs went off in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there were people who were like standing behind a fence and they got a fence pattern burned into their skin, or they were wearing a kimono with like stripes, and the stripes, like where there was stripes, they didn't get burned. Where there wasn't stripes, or where the material was clear, they did get burned. So what they found is that even just like a newspaper or some sort of barrier between you and the flash will keep you from getting burnt. Also, the nukes are probably going to come in, you're just going to explode without any really warning. You're going to hear, everybody's going to be panicking maybe because there's warning coming in, or maybe it's a terrorist setting off a nuke, so you're not going to notice. But yeah, if there is any indication that there are nukes coming in, say one blew up and the other one's about to blow up, do not look at it, because you'll burn your eyeballs out. And you don't want to do that, because that's going to make your survival chances a lot worse. So when the nukes start going off, duck and cover is the best advice, because either you're in the zone that'll kill you or you're not, and there's nothing you can do to change that, because you can't outrun a nuclear explosion. So yeah, you want to duck and cover. And if this is all kind of like alarming, well, I mean, too bad. I mean, this is just, I feel like the more you learn about this sort of thing, then the calmer like you can be about it, and the more prepared you can feel about it. So it's just like, I know these things might give people a lot of anxiety to realistically look at how it is to survive something like this, but and that's kind of why I wanted to put the halo glassing version of it, because a covenant glassing would be so much worse than nuclear fallout, because it would be like when you launch the plasma into the ground, it's like a nuclear explosion, but with the added effect of, instead of vaporizing everything it touches, it turns everything it touches into lava, like molten metal, molten rock. So there's really nowhere to hide, because they're glassing the whole planet. So they're like turning everything that is solid into like a liquid. So I kind of wanted to put it in those terms, to be like, it could be way worse. Like, at least we don't have the Covenant aliens coming to try and literally burn humanity off the face of the planet. So like, in those terms, nuclear war's not so bad. But anyway, yeah, the duck and cover method is going to be ideal in a nuclear situation, not so much in a glassing situation. And in the glassing situation, you just want to try and get to a spaceship and get off the planet, because there ain't going to be very many places to survive. So once you duck and cover and all the explosion is over, the glass stops flying, now you have two options, and I would base those two options not on the fallout but on the fires, because a lot of stuff's going to be on fire from the flash burns. So if you are in an area that's like a concrete building or something, that's going to be relatively safe from the fires, that would be a great place to shelter in place. If it's, say, a really wet area, or it's like the middle of winter and hardly anything's on fire, the ideal is you do want to shelter in place. And the fallout's it's going to start coming down within a few hours. But what you want to do, and it's written into the, what do you call it? The government's survival book I've looked up online. You want to find a place where you can shelter in place, and you want to take plastic and whatever other bags and stuff it into the cracks and crevices of the building so that you can keep the fallout from getting in. You want to have some ventilation so that to keep the air from getting stale, but you use like plastic and duct tape and whatever to keep the fallout from getting in. Anyway, so yeah, this is just practice anyway, pretty much, because I've got this whole speech written out, had it all for a long time. I don't know why people are always worried about my life. Anyway, I'm fine. Wife's like, oh no. Anyway. So for like sheltering in place, essentially fallout, it can be pretty easy to block. You can block it with 3 feet of dirt, 1 foot of concrete, or 1 inch of steel. So even like, I'm not at work, hold on. I did text my wife. She's like, you can't be TikTok living while you're at work. And I'm like, they're not here. As soon as they get here, I'm turning it off. Anyway, pretty tired. So, I don't know why I can't see why people are commenting. I think I have to have so many views and so much live screen time before I get to see what the group chat is saying. I don't know what is up with that, but hopefully we can get that fixed sometime. I'm not very familiar with the lives. I just know that they get attention for some reason, so that's why I'm using them. Plus they have the recording, and it's easy to find, so they can go back to the recording and then do some editing so that the speech is a little more coherent, you know, because that's because I've been wanting to make this on my channel for a long time. I've had a lot of ideas in pocket for a while, and I feel like now's the time to start letting these ideas out. And plus, this is something that I did in a college speech class, like they're teaching us how to speak in front of an audience and not be nervous. But that's something that I've been doing for a very long time. Just doing speeches for church stuff. So it's not something I'm scared of as public speech, but it is kind of disconcerting to get your face out there, so that's kind of the reason why I wanted to do a little bit of anonymity. But anyway, going back to it, so for sheltering in place, if you're in like a tornado shelter, that's perfect because you have a foot of concrete in those bathrooms or in those tornado shelters. If it's a designated fallout shelter, like in a basement where you have dirt between you and the fallout, then that's perfect. So it really doesn't take much. You could honestly shelter in place in your house as long as like there's some distance between your roof and yourself, so that the fallout is away from you. But what they are saying is that if you're trying to escape and you're just clogging up the roads, well, that's going to be a problem because then they can't get emergency services into you. So they would prefer that you shelter in place so that like they can get emergency services in and out quicker. And if you are sheltering in place for say a week with the nuclear fallout, you have food and water in your house and you have all the entrances plugged up with plastic, then you're going to be fine. You'll just be fine for that week, and then you can go out and the fallout will be gone. So then you can start rebuilding or finding your loved ones or whatever. And one of the things they recommend in every bug out kit is communications, like a radio or something to charge your phone with, because you can't necessarily rely on cell towers because, I mean, just look at what happened in Asheville. Like, if it wasn't for the Starlink stuff, then nobody would be able to communicate with anybody because the cell phones were all out. It's because the cell towers went down. So radio, old-fashioned radio is probably one of the best means of communication. So you want to have a radio in your bug out bag. And I recommend everybody have a bug out bag just for safety's sake, like even just for comfort of mind, peace of mind, because you're never going to need it. Like all the stuff in my bug out bag I've never used, probably never will, but it's kind of nice to have it if you're feeling nervous about stuff, or if you want peace of mind. So yeah, with that topic, with shelter in place, that's the best thing you could do, because sometimes you might be in a location that is not quite fallout proof, in which case you want to like go to somewhere that has like at least a foot of concrete on the roof, so that like it's keeping between you and the fallout is a barrier. So you might want to move around a little bit, but don't try and like actually leave the city, because everybody's going to try and leave the city all at once, which will clog the roads, which will lead to like people fighting, like, oh, I want to get out, you can't try to keep me getting out. And so what they recommend is to shelter in place, and that's what I would recommend as well. After like a week or so, I'm going to have to get the exact numbers when I redo this speech, just because the numbers are what's important. But I'm pretty sure it's around a week. You can safely leave, and when you do leave, you don't want to like take the main highways and try and like go as fast as you possibly can, because that's how accidents occur. That's how you gum up traffic. That's how you block the emergency resources from getting into helping other people who actually need it, somebody who might be sick or like need life support to survive, stuff like that. So you want to safely leave. You might want to like walk out of the city. It kind of depends on where you're at and what your situation is, because some cities it's pretty easy to get out of, and some are like in mountain towns where it's like what does that say, overheated? My phone's overheated? Interesting. Anyway, so yeah, after like a few weeks or so, it's safe to leave, and you can go and meet up with family or try and get somewhere safer, where like if you're like ways away from the nuclear bomb, fallout still follows the wind typically. So like if you're eastwards of a nuclear explosion, then you might be having to deal with fallout even if you're like in a cabin a long ways away from the city. And that's also interesting about the fallout maps, is that a lot of it it goes in lands east of where you're at, so that if you're like in the city on the edge of the blast zone, you might not even get fallout, because the fallout gets launched up into the air and eventually comes down from the wind and the rain. So you might not even have to worry about it. Let's see. Oh yeah, the aftermath. So with the nuclear fallout, there's a movie like The Day After or something, where they're talking about the fallout in the soil making it impossible to grow crops, and being just like massive famine and stuff. But since the fallout doesn't even last that long, unless the bombs are specifically made to have long-lasting fallout, then I think what you'd be more having to worry about is disruption of normal services like power and water, and like and shipment of like goods. Like, so you'd want to go and basically go on a farm or go out into the countryside, somewhere where there's a lot of natural wealth, just so that you could have an easier time surviving. Also, like, everybody's going to be working their butts off to try and restore order and restore natural, normal services to everybody, because that's what helps people survive. So essentially, the rebuilding process, you're going to want to rebuild the natural infrastructure as fast as you can, like power and water. But yeah, food is going to be critical. So Like, you have to make considerations based on, like, do you think your community is going to be able to get the right amount of food in for everybody, or do you think you should spread out and go into the countryside? So it's like, that's one of the things, the aftermath of nuclear war is fairly survivable, but it could lead to a lot of, like, gang warfare type stuff. So that's another good reason to keep, just because you want to have some ammunition and weapons for hunting and for protection, but you also might need it to fend off, any marauders. So when you look at the post-Fallout worlds, a lot of it's inaccurate, especially the mutation type stuff, because Fallout doesn't mutate people into, like, mutants or horrendous monsters, or animals into horrendous monsters, or even like two-headed. It just basically it makes you sick, and you can read up on radioactive poisoning and what it does to the body, but it doesn't turn you into a superhero. It doesn't turn you into a super mutant. It just tends to make you sick. So you don't have to worry about super mutants wandering around the wastelands. You just have to worry about people who are just looking for food and just trying to survive, who might want to, kill you for your food, or maybe even for your ammunition. Yeah, but in the event of, like, a covenant glassing, it would be way worse, because since everything has been moltenized, you can get out and there's, like, you're gonna have a hard time. It would be way worse, because since everything has been moltenized, you can get out and there's, like, you're gonna have a hard time finding water. You're gonna have a hard time finding any food. There's gonna be hardly anything alive on the planet left. No matter, like, you still would want to try and escape the planet, even if you, like, had been on the surface when it got glassed. So the big difference between a nuclear war zone and a covenant glassing is pretty stark. So I would prefer the nuclear war zone compared to what the covenant could do to a planet. On the government website, it talks about how to make a fallout shelter. Like I was saying earlier, since you only need 3 feet of dirt or 1 foot of concrete, 1 inch of steel, you're not going to have access to concrete or steel, but you can very easily just go dig a hole in the ground. Like, all you need to do is essentially find a place with no rocks or tree roots, dig a 4-foot hole, throw all the dirt to one side, get, like, a board, throw the board across the top of the hole, and then throw the dirt on top of the hole until you got 3 feet of dirt on top of the board, and boom, you got a fallout shelter. With the fallout shelters I saw designed, you basically want to have like a 5-foot trench, and then 3 feet of dirt on top of that, and then have some kind of fan to ventilate through the little fallout shelter. You also want to stock it with water and food, and hopefully you have enough water and food and ability to communicate in your bug out bag. So you would just, like, take your bug out bag, go dig a little trench, throw some dirt on top of it, and bada bing, bada boom, you're good for the fallout. So, all in all, I would say surviving nuclear fallout is pretty easy. So it just, the movies and shows, they make it look hard, but as long as you know what you're doing, it's not that big of a deal. It's pretty easy to survive. Although I do love the Fallout games. I think they're excellent, and I think that they're a really fun way of exploring the worst situation possible and surviving in the worst situation possible. I have been annoyed with the old Fallout games because I think the vegetation would make a huge bounce back really quickly. I mean, it did at Chernobyl. So if you look at Fallout 1 through, because I think the vegetation would make a huge bounce back really quickly. I mean, it did at Chernobyl. So if you look at Fallout 1 through, most of it might be because of the FEV virus. And I'm making, like, basically a Fallout-esque parallel universe book. And it was largely because of viruses that world gets fucked up. Man-made viruses. But in Fallout 76, there's actually vegetation everywhere. Like, the radiation didn't kill off every single plant there was. So I really like Fallout 76. I haven't played it much, but I'm looking forward to playing it more. But my boss is here, so I gotta get going. All right, bye. How do we end it?
All right, this is an addendum to the surviving nuclear fallout speech. I was discussing how to survive a glassing from Halo with some people on on Facebook, and they were saying that you would probably need a bunker 20 or 30 feet down, and that got me thinking like what you'd have to do for ventilation, because the lava is going to block and flow into every ventilation shaft you could come up with. So there's got to be some kind of self-containing system for a blast bunker that would survive the glassing. So I'm gonna have to do some research into bunkers and what would be tough enough to survive a glassing. Yeah, that's it. Got some more research to do.